So glad you could join us for another edition of Jamaica Magazine. Welcome. I'm your host, Adrian Atkinson. On today's program, we focus our attention on our women who are being celebrated this month. As part of that focus, we highlight an illness that disproportionately affects women. Our show starts now with a word of advice, followed by the news.
My mother taught me how to work for what I want. And if you don't work for it, then you don't deserve it.
They always tell me, be yourself. Don't try to be like others.
They help me through tough times, good time, bad time, they're always there for me.
Once the family is good, teach the children the right things, then them can grow up on the right.
Good day, I'm Theodore Henry, and this is your JIS News for Monday, March 6. Having successfully passed its first review under the precautionary standby arrangement with the IMF, Prime Minister Andrew Holness says government will remain vigilant and committed to maintaining fiscal responsibility. He says the administration will do all that's necessary to bring down the high levels of debt while ensuring that the IMF program remains on track.
Jamaica's development as an independent country means that we have to take responsibility for our fiscal management, with or without the IMF. This, for one, means that the government has to increase its monitoring, intelligence and surveillance over public bodies, for example. We need to be scouting the international and local environment for future threats that may emerge and create fiscal surprises to the government.
The Prime Minister was addressing a press conference on Friday to report on the IMF staff review of the program for the period ending December 31, 2016. Once approved by the IMF Executive Board, the team's positive review means Jamaica will get access to an additional $170 million for fiscal support. This will bring to $574 million the money available to the Bank of Jamaica for drawdown as needed. In the meantime, Finance Minister Audley Shaw says the country's economic performance remains on a positive track.
With growth expected to be around 1.7% for this fiscal year. Private sector lending and activities have increased, and our balance of payments is in a healthy position. We are on track to meeting all our fiscal targets for this year.
The Ministry of Agriculture is targeting further increase in banana exports by year end. That drive is being carried out by the Banana Board under the Jamaica Banana Accompanying Measures program, which is jointly funded by government and the European Union. General Manager of the Banana Board, Janet Coney, says exports have been steadily increasing since the resumption in 2011. This is after a 3-year break due to the devastating impact on the sector by Hurricane Gustav in 2008.
The increase in export between last year, between 2015 and 2016, was 30%. So it's not that we are not doing well. Jamaica Banana Accompanying Measures support. Our aim is to increase the overall production by 30% over 2011. And in last year, we actually did 26%. So we are well on our way.
Mrs. Coney says Jamaica's ability to capitalize on and fulfill the growing overseas demand for banana is largely dependent on local suppliers and producers attaining Global Good Agricultural Practices (GAP) certification.
We are actually preparing farmers through the Banana Export Expansion Program for Global GAP certification. Global GAP certification is necessary for export in the global market, even though we are exporting now to good niche markets. But we can export wider markets if we are certified.
Government has upgraded the Kingston facility responsible for assessing special needs children. After work costing $86 million, the Early Stimulation Program, ESP Assessment Center on Hanover Street now has a multi-purpose complex and provides more services to the children. Funding was provided by the Inter-American Development Bank, and the upgraded facility was officially handed over on Friday.
This modern center represents and provides a new lease on life for children with disabilities whose well-being and welfare will be further enhanced.
The Early Stimulation Program caters to the developmental needs of children with disabilities up to 6 years. It presently serves a population of more than 1,500 across the island with early stimulation and interventions. The Labour and Social Security Minister says clients of the program will be obtaining expanded professional and intervention services, as there will be improved administration of a range of home-based visits, parenting workshops, and counseling. She says more resources will also be allocated to other agencies serving children with special needs. Minister of Science, Energy and Technology, Dr. Andrew Wheatley, is to open the second Central American and Caribbean Renewable Energy Congress, RECAM 2017, in Panama tomorrow. Dr. Wheatley, who left the island on the weekend, will deliver the keynote ministerial opening address. The Congress, which runs from March 7 to 9, will serve as a networking opportunity for policymakers and the over 350 senior renewable energy executives in the Central American and Caribbean region. It will also place emphasis on green energy sector best practices, national policies, and case studies in the field. Dr. Wheatley says RECAM 2017 is an opportunity for Jamaica to gain further insight on the green energy landscape and the market opportunities available. Tuesday, the first day of the Congress, is also Caribbean Focus Day, where success stories from Cuba, Aruba, and Jamaica will take the spotlight. And finally, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, Olivia Grange, is praising the legacy of roots singer Eddie Fitzroy, who died on the weekend. While offering condolences to his family, friends and fans everywhere, Minister Grange says his passing represents a significant loss. In a statement, the minister asserts that in an entertainment industry where there's a lot of sameness, Eddie Fitzroy was and will continue to be a standout. Whether he was singing about the strength and beauty of his Princess Black or warning young people against the life of crime and the reality of prison life, she says there was no mistaking his distinctive singing. Minister Grange adds that he was a Jamaican original and will be missed. And that's it for JIS News Today. I'm Theodore Henry. Thanks for watching.
A message from the Bureau of Gender Affairs and the Dispute Resolution Foundation, paid for by the UN Women Fund for Gender Equality.
The Ministry's overall bilateral strategy for the ensuing fiscal year will focus on strengthening Jamaica's traditional partnerships while maximizing the opportunities which they present. A second plank of our strategy is the forging of new relationships and alliances with emerging markets.
Within the pages of this book is the story of how the ministry will fulfill this mandate and what it will cost the national budget.
No country, irrespective of its stage of development, can achieve optimum prosperity for its people without the support of bilateral, regional, and multilateral partners.
During the 2017-2018 fiscal year, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade will be undertaking a strategic review of its structure and operations. The goal is to strengthen its capacity to more effectively engage its international partners and governments. Approximately $383 million is allocated in the budget for the ministry's general administration functions. A major focus of the ministry this fiscal year is the completion of Jamaica's foreign trade policy.
We've been developing foreign policy strategies designed to promote new and expanded partnerships. It is important that these partnerships give impetus to our economic growth agenda with the attendant benefit of creating jobs and the ultimate goal of a better quality of life for all our people.
$137.68 million is allocated to support the ministry's efforts to maintain and strengthen Jamaica's bilateral relationships. The Diaspora and Consular Affairs Department is to receive $34.78 million to strengthen the linkages with the Jamaican diaspora.
Jamaica's economic growth strategy recognizes the diaspora as a critical partner in the pursuit of the social and economic development of our nation. The government, through its newly established Economic Growth Council, has embarked on initiatives to harness their unrealized potential.
2017-2018 targets for the Foreign Affairs Ministry include the implementation of the Comprehensive National Diaspora Policy and maximizing on the biennial staging of the Jamaica 55 Diaspora Conference.
We will also be repurposing national institutions into a Global Connect Jamaica, GLOJAM, a public-private partnership thrust geared towards encouraging the Jamaican diaspora to invest in Jamaica.
The Foreign Affairs budget also includes $2.4 million to offset the operational costs of the U.S. Peace Corps in Jamaica. Jamaica's high commissions, embassies, consulates general, and permanent missions overseas are tasked with creating opportunities for trade, investment, and tourism, and securing development assistance and debt relief for the country. They command the largest portion of the ministry's budget with a total allocation of $2.67 billion. It includes $633.4 million for the High Commissions, $864.6 million for embassies, $568.4 million for consulates general, and $611.76 million for permanent missions.
We intend to expand the depth and breadth of our overseas representation by reviewing and strengthening our network of honorary consular representatives.
The National Consular Policy will also be completed to improve the quality of consular services to Jamaican and foreign nationals.
Our membership of regional organizations such as the CARICOM, CELAC, and the OAS reflect the significant role that these and other regional bodies play in providing technical, economic, and functional cooperation for Jamaica.
$836.9 million is budgeted to secure Jamaica's continued membership in CARICOM, the Office of Trade Negotiations, the Organization of American States, and the Secretariat of the Association of Caribbean States. Another $69 million will go to the Commonwealth Organization.
In respect of our bilateral and multi-regional relationships,
$64.5 million will be paid to the United Nations and its agencies, and $27.1 million to international trade organizations, specifically the World Trade Organization and the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group, the ACP.
Jamaica will continue to honor its bilateral commitments as well as those made in other spheres. We will also remain vigilant in respect of ongoing global developments that affect us all. We stand ready to exercise the requisite principles, vision, care, and pragmatism in the conduct of our foreign policy and relations as we seek to contribute to a better world for all of us.
We want a productive Jamaica. We are not productive Jamaicans. Productivity to move forward on this land. Productivity, that's the way to go, we should understand. Productivity is the way to go for all us Jamaicans. Small business, big business, old and young, we are tell every woman and man. We want growth and prosperity for a better nation with a building plan. money in a hand. Our economy can rise to a level and build a better nation. Productivity to move forward on this land. Productivity, that's the way to go, we should understand. Productivity to move forward on this land. Productivity, that's the way to go, we should understand. Productivity.
Productivity, Pathway to Prosperity. A message brought to you by the Jamaica Productivity Center, a department of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security.
Are you a female over 40? Do you have a history of cancer in your family? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then this next feature is for you.
For accurate and easy screening, there are a few things women should not do on the day they're scheduled for a mammogram.
They should try to wear a two-piece outfit to make it easier for the top to be removed when we're doing the mammogram, because the patient has to be naked from the neck down to the waist for us to get the breast properly. We ask them also not to put any powder or lotions on the breast, nor to use any deodorant that has a white residue, because it will simulate calcifications in the breast. No jewelry that is going to be hanging in the body part.
The results of your mammogram can be given to you either by the radiologist at the completion of the mammogram or the doctor who ordered the screening. They will tell you whether the mammogram is normal or not. If there is what's called a spot on your mammogram, that's considered abnormal. But don't panic.
An abnormal mammogram report does not necessarily mean that the patient has breast cancer. The mammogram is simply an X-ray of the breast. If there is any mass in the breast that is there at the time that the mammogram is done, or any lesion in the breast, then the mammogram will show it. Now, this can be something benign like a fibroadenoma. It can be something malignant like cancer.
Although mammograms are recommended and effective, women shy away from doing one because the procedure is sometimes uncomfortable. Dr. Cornwell says the benefits far outweigh the discomfort.
I could tell you that the pain from a mammogram is much less than the pain from breast cancer when it is detected, especially if it is detected late. So we will encourage all women to do mammogram. Mammogram is the only imaging modality that can pick up cancer at the earliest possible stage.
For further information on breast cancer and mammograms, contact the nearest health center or the Jamaica Cancer Society, 16 Lady Musgrave Road, Kingston 5. Telephone 927-4265 or 927-3317.
On June 25, 2012, Jamaican sprinter Noveline Williams-Mills was diagnosed with breast cancer. In that same year, she finished 5th in the 400 meters at the London Olympics and won a bronze medal in the 4x400 meter relays. At 31 years old, this young woman is a 5-time world champion and 3-time Olympic medalist representing Brand Jamaica proudly. She was brave enough to do a double mastectomy, removing both her breasts to lessen her chances of getting the disease again. In recent times, Williams-Mills is bravely speaking out to stress that early detection is what saved her life and to educate people that breast cancer is no respecter of age, fitness, or talent. More important, she wants people to know breast cancer can be beaten. We salute Noveline Williams-Mills and all our breast cancer survivors. Keep fighting.
As we celebrate women who have contributed to nation building, we highlight the contributions of our only female national hero, Nanny of the Maroons.
Lend me a nanny now.
Nanny? Which of the money is that again? You know, it's long time me not use Jamaican money. Because me not here, me in foreign.
It's the $500. The one with the only female hero on it. Nanny of the Maroons? Or you remember she either?
Yeah, you know, a little bit.
What? Oh, you feel remember the great Nanny of the Maroons? Alright, let me give you a run through.
Today, Moortown and other communities in the Blue and John Crow Mountains of northeastern Jamaica stand as permanent reminders of the bravery and fortitude of the island's only female national hero, Nanny of the Maroons. Nanny was among a group of brave enslaved men and women who dared to resist their master's rule by running away. These runaway slaves formed communities in the hilly interior of the island and fiercely protected them from the Spanish and later the British. After decades of warfare, the British finally yielded by recognizing the Maroons as an independent people with the signing of a treaty in 1739. The autonomy of the Windward Maroons is largely due to Nanny's tenacity as a revolutionary chiefess. Most of what we know about Maroon leaders, including Nanny, has been passed down through oral history, but that hasn't diluted her prominence in Jamaican folklore. According to stories, Nanny came to Jamaica as a slave from the Ashanti tribe of the Akan region of West Africa. It is said that she, along with her brothers Akompong, Kojo, Johnny, Kofi, and Kwaho, ran away from a St. Thomas plantation, settling in the mountains of Portland. Nanny remained in the Blue Mountains while her brothers branched out into other mountainous regions on the western end of the island. Popularly known as Nanny Town, Tony River, as the Maroons called it, was led by Nanny. Nanny's community was well organized, with its members surviving on animals raised and hunted, as well as crops grown and raided from plantations. Security came in the form of the location of the community high in the Blue Mountains, weapons seized in raids, and traditional African weapons of bow, arrows, and spears. Tony River was destroyed in one of the many fights between the Maroons and the British, causing Nanny to move her community deeper into the hills to what is now present-day Moortown.
Oh, me remember now. But you see, this part of the story, I hear it time and time again. But what I'm curious about though is what kind of woman she was. I mean, like, with all the fighting to maintain freedom, a family. Did she have any husband?
Yes, man. Nanny was a woman for all seasons. From the stories me hear, she didn't marry a man named Ado, but them never have any children. That no means that she never married any children, you know. She was mommy nanny, granny nanny. She helped raise most of the children in Tony River.
Innit?
Nanny was our mother. She was our queen, she was our priestess, and she was our chieftainess. Because she operated in all four roles, right? She was mother for the entire community. She was royal, she was regal, right? She was a queen. In terms of the spiritual ways of the community, in the guiding of the community, she was that person who would take on that role for the community. She was a military strategist for the community as well, so therefore she was a chiefess. Any leader of any ilk or any quality generally rules with two gloves. You know, two separate pair of gloves. One is a cotton glove and one is a iron glove. And you have the cotton glove on and then you have the iron one and you put the cotton one over it.
And Queen Nanny did just that, making a community out of different African tribes with kindness and compassion. But she was also a stern leader, dealing with dissent while making tough decisions. Nanny was not only the political and military leader of her tribe, she also served as spiritual leader. Before Nanny and the Maroon warriors would go off to battle the British, she would prepare them for ambushes, the popular style of Maroon combat.
Warriors would be trained and everybody would be given a cut and they would send to a special pool in the river, right? Where they could go and dip in the water. And if you come back out and your cut is not well, then you don't go to fight. But anybody who dip and come back out and they cut as well, then they can go into fight. You know, there are times when it requires a consultation with the jege, and if you consult the jege and the jege tell you can't go, then you don't go to fight. You do a lot of things, and that was going on the responsibility.
Always looking out for the well-being of her fellow Africans, Granny Nanny rescued slaves from the plantations on the plains. It's often said that after the Maroons signed the treaty with the British, they began to turn back runaway slaves, or even captured them for the British.
The fact is that the Maroons would have taken in more persons than they would have returned. 200 years ago, 275 years ago, it had much more vegetation than now. It was much more covered, and more people could have come and stay in the community undetected by the authorities. The authorities had 2 white superintendents who were supposed to reside with the Maroons, and most of the time the Maroons make life for them rough, so that they had to leave. So many of the time they never really have the white superintendent living with them, so they could take in anybody that they want. The Maroons would have deliberately gone to the plantation and take away slaves from the plantation.
What about her death though? Like, how did she die?
Well, the British want people to believe that them loyal slave copy did kill her in the war. But the Maroons themselves Nanny lived long after the war ended. She buried in a bunk grave in Moortown.
And legacy. Talk to me about her legacy. Legacy.
Today, Maroon communities such as Moortown continue to keep Nanny's warrior spirit and Maroon heritage alive.
We like Jamaica to know that we're still here. You know, the generation is still here, and we're still keeping the things together. You know what I mean? We still drum, we still dance, you know. So Jamaica can just keep on, you know, come and who want to can come and visit the community, and we're here, you know, to take you on the tours wherever you want to go. You want to go to Nanny Falls, you know what I mean? You want to sit and reason about Nanny. We're still here. It's not like the culture dead out or anything like that.
So Nanny was truly a mystical woman of all seasons.
Yes. Like, when I tell you more about the heroine, I can't get the Nanny now.
You're not easy, you know. But no problem. You can have your Nanny.
And that's how we draw the curtains down on another edition of Jamaica Magazine. For this and other programs, visit our website, jis.gov.jm, or our YouTube page. We're also available on Facebook, Twitter, and through our mobile app that's Android and iOS compatible. On behalf of the entire team here at the JIS, I'm Adrian Atkinson. Thank you for watching.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.